compromise. Because the people who say that remember when the two parties were regional parties, right? The Republican Party was the party of the North, the Democratic Party was the party of the South, and if somebody told you they were Republican, you didn't know whether they wanted higher taxes or lower taxes. You didn't know they were born north of the Mason-Dixon line. And then it was very easy to have bipartisan agreement on legislation because there were no principles involved. There was no difference. There were conservative Republicans and conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans and liberal Democrats, and there were little old ladies in Mississippi who agreed with Ronald Reagan on absolutely everything and voted for George McGovern because Sherman had been unpleasant to Atlanta recently. And so bipartisan, everything was bipartisan. The liberal Republicans and liberal Democrats would fight the conservative Republicans and conservative Democrats. Every win-loss was bipartisan because the parties didn't mean anything. Then during Reagan's lifetime, the parties sorted out, and if you wanted a more expansive view of the role of government, you were Republican. If you wanted more constrained, more expansive view of the government, you were Democrat. More constrained view, you were Republican, and the Republicans became the party that wouldn't raise your taxes, and the Democrats always would, and they were separated out on a whole host of issues, but on the central tax and spending issues, they were heading different directions. It was easy in the 40s and the 30s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s to have bipartisan compromise because Richard Nixon wanted the government to get bigger, and Ted Kennedy wanted it to get much bigger. And so you would compromise with somewhat bigger, in between bigger and much bigger. And you would play this game over and over again until you're up against the wall over there, because the whole thing moved that way. But it was a compromise, right? Nixon had one position, more government, and Ted Kennedy had another position, much more government. They compromised it pretty much more government. Today, the Republican Party wants lower spending and less taxes. The Democrat Party wants higher spending and higher taxes. What the heck would a compromise look like? They're trying to go in different directions. If you move in one direction or the other, somebody wins, somebody loses. There's no compromise here. There's win-loss because it's a zero-sum game in terms of size of government. And so I'm all in favor of compromise if by compromise you mean I want to move towards liberty as quickly as we can. And if there's something in the way, like a Democratic president or a Democratic Senate, I understand I can only get so far before they have the power to stop it. I'm willing to go as far as I can, and I understand I can't get a whole loaf, maybe I can get a quarter of a loaf. The alternative is a quarter or nothing, I'll take a quarter. Okay? So, if you're trying to get to California, where are we now? About if you're in D.C. and you're trying to get to California, if you get to Missouri, that's not treason. Missouri's on the way to California. But if your feet are wet and everybody around you speaking French, you're losing, okay? You've been heading in the wrong direction. While corruption is sometimes, John Fund was talking about compromise meaning corruption, the sense in which I tend to hear compromise in D.C. is when the establishment press said, would you please lose, okay? Accept a tax increase. That's not compromise, that's losing. We're trying to have lower taxes, you want higher taxes, we end up with higher taxes. We lost, we didn't compromise, we lost. And so the left is always trying to explain why don't you compromise when what they mean is why don't you lose? And the answer is sometimes we do lose, it's not on purpose. Sometimes we get beat when the other team has all the votes. But we should never be complicit in doing something where we lose and argue that somehow this was some negotiated agreement. You can get run over, that happens. Cars do that to pedestrians. The minority in the House or the Senate or the guys who don't have the presidency, they can lose. California shows Republicans can lose with some regularity. But bipartisan compromise only exists when the class interests of politicians are completely at odds with the interests of consumers and citizens, and they gang up on you, like giving themselves more pensions or higher pay, or kneecapping their competitors with campaign finance reform. So then you can have bipartisan consensus on those sorts of self-interest issues, but on the big-ticket issues, there isn't such consensus possible.
So before